long time coming, and it's great to have it in the world. I mean, even tonight demonstrates what extraordinary range Doug had. I mean, he was just so brilliant. Anyway, I'm going to read two. I was going to read The Irish Americans, but I was listening to it and I realized it was a really terrible poem that mischaracterized Irish Americans in a really annoying way. That poem, actually, probably a lot of you know this. Doug wrote a great poem called The Americans in Magic Fire Chevrolet, and then we had a benefit for him here in the late 90s when his apartment burned down. And I wrote a parody of the Americans called The Welsh People. So the Irish Americans was his retaliation. So he took all of my shortcomings and universalized them into Irish American traits. So I'm going to read two, American Sestina and Paros. American Sestina. Michael Lally, for those of you who don't know, is a very close friend of mine, was a good friend of Doug's and of other people here tonight, who left DC in '75 but had a big impact while he was here. I think the rest is self-explanatory. American Sestina. I met Terry and Susan on a long, dark highway. They had a boy named Michael with them. Streams of hilarity flooded the future. Trails of grief fled back into yesterday. A fleshy, cherubic Welshman named Dylan Thomas donated his name to American music. Dylan had blonde curls and 18 double scotches. He went into the dark like a porpoise submerging. We all go into what is written. Some, like Michael Lally, like to write it themselves. The future is all hilarity. Eric Mottram threw the I Ching in 1972. It told him, beware hilarity. I didn't buy it, but I did buy the new Bob Dylan album sometime in the recent future. I imagine a woman's dark face whose name and body I know well, I think, and I remember Michael Mullen's kid brother Vincent, my boyhood best friend. He's gone into memory. He became a cop, died violently 20 years ago, stepped into the unknowable from the unknown. Such hilarity. Did you know the name Michael means who is like God? In Hebrew, it's Hebrew. The name Dylan means from the sea. It's Welsh. They are a dark people, the Welsh. They have no future that is not implied by their past. The future coheres like sexual pleasure. I'd look into it, you. Mirrors are dark before the dawn. They contain hilarity as women contain the mystery of life's creation. Bob Dylan and Michael Lally and all men contain the mystery of life's mutation. Ha! Michael rowed the boat ashore from the sea, who is like God. In future, be sure to swim like a porpoise, blue as lightning. Dylan knows the difference. Van Morrison too. Into the mystic, real gone song. Hilarity takes hold. Dark eyes watch you. Out of one future into another, everything splitting. Dylan's old hilarity follows Michael's gaze into the common dark. So Eric Mottram was, I forgot to mention that, he was a friend, or at least an acquaintance of Doug's, who actually published some of Doug's work in the early 70s in a journal in the UK called Poetry Review, I think. And Mottram was the guy who sort of introduced the Beats to the London scene of that era, late 60s, early 70s. So Doug, you know, he had an interesting relationship, I think, to poetic forms. Like he obviously was not a conventional, traditional writer, but he loved the challenge, I think, or just the technical challenge of taking on things like sestinas and sonnets, which he had a real kind of smash and grab approach to it. I mean, he would just take these forms and blow them up and redo them in his own, very unique and brilliant way. And I remember I wrote my first villanelle, and I think it was in the late 90s. And Doug and I would read poems to each other all the time, on the phone usually. And so I read this to him, and of course, you know, you give Doug, I mean, most artists I think are opportunistic, so you give Doug something like that, and he's going to make it his own. So he emails me a few days later with this poem, Paros. And then the poem like disappeared for a long, long time. And when I retired from my museum job, I was going through all these old emails, and I found it. And I actually, in his last years, his memory failed him, and he would forget, you know, things that he wrote, etc. But I would read this poem to him all the time because I really liked it a lot, and he liked it every time he heard it. Paros was the Greek island where he taught at an art school in the late 60s. So again, this isn't really like an orthodox villanelle, but it's great. Paros. Back at the blue villa, Nell is dirty, hungry, horny, alone and smarting with imagined slights, but invisible spinning molecules make life divine. In the big taverna, Rocky and grilled octopus are served, and the happy gang celebrates the twilight, while back at the blue villa, Nell is dirty, hungry, horny. 100 years, and all are gone, and pretty much forgotten. But in the blue villa, Nell and time stand still. Invisible spinning molecules make life divine. Men and women, friends and lovers, stagger drunkenly down the packed sand and into the phosphorescent sea. Back at the blue villa, Nell is dirty, hungry, horny. The moon so bright, you can read a book by its light, a sense of loss more various than the myriad stars. Invisible spinning molecules make life divine. The happy gang disperses, fades and disappears. Day is night, night is day, the ferry boat docks, and back at the blue villa, Nell is dirty, hungry, horny. Invisible spinning molecules make life divine.